Welcome everyone to the Construct Innovate webinar series on modern methods of construction. My name is Jamie Goggins and I'm co-director of Construct Innovate, which is Ireland's National Research Centre for Construction Technology and Innovation. We're very fortunate to have some great speakers again this week, where we're going to focus on international perspectives on modern methods of construction and what Ireland should steal or maybe borrow or take inspiration from. Depends on what perspective you want to come from. This is an 8-part webinar series. We're on week 4 now, and we'll continue through until the week 8. We're really lucky to have lots of experience here today and from different perspectives of things. So our first speaker is going to be Neil McArthur, who's Global MMC and Offsite Manufacturing Advisor, and his company is the Drumbeg Consultancy Limited. So Neil has a lot of experience right around the world, from Asia, the UK, and so on, further afield, around both working with design side, but also with the factories as well in terms of the industrialized construction side. So he's going to give us a perspective on that side. Then we have Darren Richards, who's Offsite Manufacturing Industrialised Construction Expert. He also chairs the Industrialised Construction Advisory Board, and he's Managing Director of Cogent Consulting as well. And he's going to focus on light gauge steel and in particular a UK perspective on what we could learn from that side of things. Then Waco, who's Executive Chair and Founder of the Prefab Council of Australia, and also CEO and Founder of PowerHouse Homes and Models in Australia. And he's going to tell us some lessons that we could learn from the Australian perspective. So we'll have the 3 presenters in there, about 15 minutes each. This has been recorded, make it available afterwards on our YouTube channel. After our 3 presenters, then we will have the Q&A session at the very end. So if you have any questions for any of our presenters as they're presenting, please do post them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And as I say, we'll come to all the questions at the very end of the session. So further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first presenter, Neil McArthur, who's a global MMC and offsite manufacturing advisor, and he's going to give us some perspective from the international industrial design and construction. So over to you, Neil.
There we go. Thank you. So what I'd like to do today is really just give a whistle-stop tour of some of the organizations, some of the systems, some of the aspects of what is happening globally. I'm fortunate enough to have been to some of these factories and facilities. It's also interesting just to see what is actually happening out in the wide world. And what I want to do is start with this. Some of you see this. It's a humble brick. Now that brick, I've managed to trace it back. I'm here in Egypt at the moment, 3,500 years BC, when the brick was starting to be manufactured and used in construction. It's still used around the world. It hasn't changed dramatically in that time. So what I'm saying is that innovation can work very well, and in other aspects, innovation is not needed at all. Let's start with what I am going to really explain in some detail, as much as I can in 15 minutes. So bear with me while I slot on to a presentation.
Okay, you just let me know and I'll move on.
Okay, change slide, please. So what I want to do is just give you a whistle-stop tour of some different manufacturers and different systems that are being used from the States into Europe, into Asia, and into Australia. Next slide, please. I think one of the things that we're all very aware of is just really the number of words that are being used around MMC, prefab, offsite manufacturing. And when you see the number of words that are there, the technology, the solutions, and everything else that's running with that, I think we're going to be quite mindful that, with all these words, we've got to be able to back that up and to be able to deliver on technology, deliver on future manufacturing, the like. So, what you'll see coming through is actually what's happening. And one of the early examples here is of a 3D modular hotel that was designed in the US. It's a modular hotel, and interestingly enough, it was nearly 1,000 modules that were manufactured, and they were manufactured on site. Now, that started in the mid-60s. So as far back as the 60s, we had on-site manufacturing of modules in a 3D form that were coming completely fitted out. And if you can move to the next slide, you will see who was doing this. It was, in fact, the Walt Disney Company. So whilst they were making cartoons, they were also investing into large-scale Disney worlds. Next slide, please. And there you can see the hotel today is still in use. It was built using a frame system. Modules were sliding in, and there you can see the complete fitted out unit. So some things are new, but when you think about going back to the mid-60s, what really has changed? These images could be put out and are regularly put out today. Moving on. I think we're all familiar with the big numbers that are being revolved around MMC, prefab globally. And regarding the overall numbers, and really just depending on which set of numbers you look at, I've seen numbers of $169 billion marketplace globally. I've seen it as high as $200 billion. But what you've got to accept is that that is not just covering housing. It's covering schools, hospitals, industrial buildings, workforce camps. Globally, these are happening. And if I could have the next slide, please. You will see it's very interesting to see the size of the market, but then, of course, that market has got to be served in some shape or form by the supply chain. And is the supply chain there? Is it ready? Is it able to deliver and tap into that? I'm not going to answer that question. That's for others. And when you look at it, and I've taken a basket of countries here about what the housing demand is, because I think that's one of the topics that we're all really interested in. And here's a basket of 15 countries. And in the next 10 years, 68 million homes are going to be needed just in these few countries. So again, it's tapping into that. How much of that can actually be covered off? How much of that can be ultimately delivered through traditional and non-traditional, that is, modern methods of construction? The percentages, if you look in the manufacturing element, tend to be nothing more than a few percent. I don't think I've seen anything more than about 10 or 15% generally across the world about what can be delivered. So when you think about it, that is a big number to work with. And part and parcel of all of that revolves around what else is needed apart from housing, what's needed to deliver that. And again, here's a basket of typical prefabricated elements that are going in. And whether that's the actual 3D module, bathroom pods, basement systems, prefabricated balconies, the whole aspect of what is manufactured off-site is actually just growing and growing and growing. And that is just a snapshot. Now tapping into some of the organizations that are doing MMC well, who are running factories and are doing it today. This first example is VBC, which will be known to quite a lot of certainly the Irish community. VBC took over the former Catera factory in Tracy in California. It's a 600,000 square foot factory. And within that factory, they refitted that a number of years ago to enable them to deliver both manufactured 3D steel and 3D timber modules. And it's certainly one of the largest facilities, if not in the States, certainly globally. They use a tried and tested system. It delivers, and it delivers well. And along with their facilities on the East Coast and in Poland, they're able to deliver efficient and, I suppose, ultimately what the market is looking for, which is multi-floor apartments and hotels. So they're doing it today, and they're doing it from a large facility. Moving across to Dubai and Saudi Arabia, the modular elements that are being delivered in the Middle East are relatively new, but one of the trailblazers in that is an organization called Amana. They only manufacture in precast concrete. They deliver 3D pre-fitted concrete modules that in some cases can weigh over 100 tons. I've seen some of them being lifted, and I've worked in some of their modules where they are sitting at even 110 tons is what's being moved. They also have a vast manufacturing facility to cover off with bathroom pods. So 3D manufacturing in the Middle East is still, relatively speaking, in its infancy, but those that are doing it today are doing it well, and they're doing it at scale. Next slide, please. In Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, they have got a huge demand for middle market private housing. And one of the organizations that's charged with delivering that is, in effect, what you and I would call a housing developer called Roshan. They have recently signed a manufacturing partnership deal with the China Harbour Engineering Company. Now, what do? They produce at scale from a 22 million square foot facility. And this probably gives you an idea of the scale of what's happening outside of Europe. And they deliver precast panels, which are then formed on site to deliver what are typically 2 or 3 story villas, which can, again, on average, be somewhere in the region of 300 square meters each. So again, the Chinese have come in. They are able to deliver these at speed and basically can deliver what the client is looking for. They're charged with delivering 30,000 homes out of a requirement of 300,000 homes. Next slide, please. Moving down to Australia, Modscape and Modbotics predominantly are delivering residential and schools. They are tech-driven. The robotic systems that they're using are Scandinavian from Randek, but they have come on a long way in a very short space of time. They've been able to implement the robotic systems because, again, it comes back in commercial terms to where labor costs are high and labor costs are a vast percentage of the actual build-up of the commercial value of an apartment or a school. They've been able to integrate a really good system whereby Randek and the Modbotics team have been able to create a successful factory. But again, they didn't start off from that. They developed and moved into it, which is important when you're scaling the particular manufacturers. Next slide. HVAC, skids, chiller rooms, plant rooms, MEP plant rooms are playing an important part now in terms of the delivery, not only for residential projects or hospitality or healthcare, where there's a big demand for prefabricated offsite plant, but more so now in the data center market. Without question, the data center market is enormous, and it's come from almost nowhere to, $1 trillion business. So aspects like this, where it is real engineering and it's high-tech engineering. So looking at this is an American organization who specialize in all aspects of the content that can go into some of these skids. Next slide, please. So again, flipping back to China, and this was on my opening slide, and it is a project at Hong Kong Airport. And at airports, the downtime is pretty well, particularly at an international airport as busy as Hong Kong, is always kept to a minimum. And as part of the expansion, they had to install a new air bridge. The manufacturers of this designed it in 3 component parts. It was shipped in on barges from China. The modules themselves, the components, were assembled on site at the airport. And Mammoth, along with the manufacturer and the contractors, assembled the three modules into one component, one offsite manufactured component in the center. That's a 5,200 ton offsite manufactured component. It was jacked up and it was moved just over 3 kilometers in the space of about 5 hours. It was then positioned and it was lifted into position, and the whole project to move that and relocate it, not commission it, but to relocate it, was done overnight. So again, this just gives you an indication of the scale of what is being delivered today, the engineering that is being used today to deliver offsite manufacturing. And I think we sometimes tend to think of it as being some housing, some schools, some 2D panels, some 3D modules. But when you start moving out into the global market, you can see actually what's being done. And I think in anyone's eyes, to see a 5,000 ton module being moved is comparable to some of the offshore oil rigs that are being used at the moment, whereby the accommodation modules are being lifted in, where there might be 100 or 150 berth cabins being moved in a single module. So from that, I would like to move on to what will be really the most interesting aspect of offsite manufacturing. And this is part of what is never seen in any project. It's the rebar. It's rebar for cages, for piles, for rafts, and for cores and D-wall. In Saudi Arabia, GMT Robots from Denmark and Samsung from South Korea came together and have created one of probably the most tech-driven aspect of offsite that I've seen. It is complete robotic cut and bend, and welding and fabrication with an up to 80% reduction in manpower. This is used at scale, and it's already being used globally, whereby the combination of robots, the combination of tech, and the aspect of the engineering is coming together to create what is a huge advantage in terms of cost, quality, the time it takes. And these factories can be operated 24/7. That is really an aspect. And as I say, it's something that once it's in the ground or once it's in the raft, it's gone. You don't see it, but it plays a vital part in the start and commissioning of every project. And next slide, please. So that's the wrap up. It's been a whistle-stop tour, but what I wanted to do was ensure that everything that I was letting you see today is happening today and is not on a wish list of what might happen. So I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present that, and look forward to taking some questions at the end. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Neil. That's great overview of different types, I suppose, of systems and how they're used in different parts of the world in there, from all the 3D volumetric to panelized systems to huge offsite manufacturing, like the 5-ton air bridge that you showed, for an example, in Hong Kong. It's great. Some of this is coming in Ireland, and we can discuss this as well, like in there. But like the examples that you showed with the skids for the data centers and the chillers, some great companies in Ireland doing that as well, like Castle Modular and Kirby Group in there, and the industrialized rebar, cage, and reinforcement modules like some Midland Steel in there. Tony Woods have done great investment there as well as part of it. So we can see some of this has come more recently into Ireland as well, and I'm sure we'll see more of that. So I'm sure there's lots of questions for Neil in the Q&A in there. We can pick his brains with all the experience he has from being in these factories and working with people all across the world and that. So if anyone has any questions for Neil, please do post them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So with that, we're going to move over to our next presenter. Next presenter being Darren Richards, who's going to give us a UK perspective, and in particular on the UK light gauge steel frames. So over to you, Darren.
Thanks very much, Jamie. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
And you can see the PowerPoint presentation working, yeah?
Yeah.
Lovely. I'll crack on. So my brief was specifically to look at one technology rather than the broad spectrum that Neil was looking at. And it was to draw some comparisons with the UK light steel frame industry. A play on the words, I think, of the original title, which is what can Ireland steal from the UK light steel frame sector. So I'm going to focus on one technology and what the developments are within this technology space and how it might align to some other offsite technologies. So, Darren Richards, I work for a company called Cogent Consulting. I also wear several other hats. So today I'm representing my position on the board of the Light Steel Frame Association, but I also chair the UK's Industrialised Construction Advisory Board. Everything we do focuses around offsite and industrialised construction, predominantly in the manufacturing space. And what we're looking at is manufacturing productivity, product development, onboarding, different techniques and different technologies. So not just light steel frame, but across timber frame, precast concrete, MEP, etc. But today I'm focusing predominantly on light steel frame technology. So what I want to start with was what's driving some of the dynamics of the UK market. UK's got some significant challenges, as I know a number of territories around the world have got. But our biggest challenge of the three that we would typically look at, skills, sustainability, and productivity. Our biggest challenge is productivity. And productivity doesn't get the airtime that we think it should. It certainly does in manufacturing environments, but it doesn't in the wider construction space. But I put a quote on the slide here from Paul Krugman, who's an economist, saying that productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything. And we're quite baffled as to why productivity does not get spoken about when you connect it to the benefits of offsite manufacturing and offsite construction. So UK government has recognised some of this recently, and we've set some objectives for achieving better productivity by 2030. But it's probably worth putting into context where the productivity gap exists at the moment, because it genuinely is the industry's nemesis. You can see here the orange line is where construction productivity lies. It's been pretty flatlined over the last 20, 25 years. If you compare that to manufacturing industry productivity, that has consistently grown over the last 20, 25 years. But when you factor construction alongside manufacturing productivity for the whole economy, you can see we're fairly flat from a UK perspective. So we've got some serious challenges to try and get the line to tick up a little bit more. So we have summarized what we think it needs to be addressed to improve the productivity, and I'll try and contextualize where light steel frame fits in to this. But our mantra is very much around steering construction like production. So we think there should be more cognizance of some of the manufacturing techniques and technologies that we might employ to make manufacturing facilities more productive and more efficient. That includes building longer term relationships in terms of suppliers and supply chains, scaling improvements and sharing information and IP, applying technology perhaps in a slightly more ambitious or a slightly more aggressive way to demonstrate productivity improvement, investing in skills. We're seeing that the industry needs a whole new type of skill set to be able to enable a lot of the offsite MMC and industrialized construction methodologies. And in truth, it's going to take a combination of all of these things to really improve productivity in the UK. And light steel frame and offsite generically will have a big role to play. So wearing my Light Steel Frame Association hat, and putting some context to this around where the light steel frame industry is moving to in the UK. The LSFA, which is the acronym for the association, is obviously working to drive a lot more engagement, so a lot more dialogue with designers, contractors, architects around an appreciation for what you can do with light steel frame. The association is acting as a change champion, so we're trying to connect people, share knowledge, share information. This is one of these types of exchange portals and information exchange that we're very happy to do. We want to receive information back and look at where best in class in light steel frame might be in other parts of the world. But primarily what we want to do is spread the word. So going back to Neil's kind of example of the brick that's been around several thousand years, light steel frame has been around much shorter time than that, maybe 35, 40 years in the UK in particular. But it is growing faster than most other offsite manufacturing techniques in the UK at the moment. So what our aim is primarily is to share the wealth of experience and the technical know-how that our members have. And it's one of my bugbears, really. The frustrations that I have is that often designers, engineers, clients, contractors don't go to where the knowledge really exists. They don't engage the supply chain early enough, and they don't understand what the manufacturers need to drive efficiency within their business and to ultimately deliver more efficient and more sustainable buildings. So a lot of what the LSFA does is advocacy, it's engagement, it's sharing information through various platforms, whether that be online-based, magazine-based, or conference-based activity. And we are the representative voice, effectively, of the wider light steel frame industry within the UK. So one of the things that I've done is try and summarize myriad of different drivers that are affecting the light steel frame technology's direction of travel in the UK. And I put 5 items together here. I could have put 20 items, but I picked what I consider to be the 5 top items. The first one that's had one of the biggest impacts on light steel frame uptake and design and development in the last 2 years within the UK is the Building Safety Act, which I'll come on to in a second. It's closely associated with that, the development of digital passports, digital product passports. It's quite a new thing, but now mandated in several sectors. Fire safety regulation, again, links to the Building Safety Act, but there is a separate regulation that's been driven through in the UK in recent times. And we've seen a fairly big shift in the change towards testing, validation of all forms of offsite activity, but a change of kind of certification landscape, I think, is probably what I'd like to touch on. And then obviously a clear direction which has been around a while for the drive in the UK towards net zero and sustainable targets. So picking up on the Building Safety Act, I would summarize this as probably the largest change to building regulations in the UK in a generation. This came out of the unfortunate Grenfell Tower disaster several years ago. It's taken the UK government quite a bit of time to understand what went wrong in that particular building, where legislation fell down, where certification fell down, etc. But government has put legislation through, and we now have a whole series of new regulations under the Building Safety Regulator that is driving design and specification across all buildings, not just high-risk buildings or high-rise buildings, but across all buildings. And in some ways, the Building Safety Act and what the regulator is doing is playing very strongly into the hands of the offsite sector, and it's particularly playing very strongly into the hands of the light steel frame technology manufacturers. Part of the requirement of the Building Safety Regulation and Building Safety Act is that we need to have much greater traceability, what's called the golden thread in terms of specification and data sets to go with the technology or the panels or the systems or the modules that we're using, but all with the aim of trying to drive safer outcomes. So making sure that that information passes down the manufacturing supply chain to the installer, to the contractor, ultimately to the end user and owner of the building. And what we're trying to do is, as a Light Steel Frame Association, is try and identify how the light steel frame sector can provide several of those key drivers, preferentially over timber, for example. So we have a non-combustible material versus timber, which is clearly a combustible material. And regulations in recent times in the UK have capped the use of timber above 18 metres. So you've got to build with timber below 18 metres, but there is no cap on the height that we can build load-bearing and non-load-bearing light steel frame in terms of height in the UK. In terms of the digital product passports, this is an interesting development, sometimes referred to as material passports, but this is to really underpin the golden threads. This is about how you pass the information about those systems and processes that you've employed within the technology that you've used. So in this case, light steel frame. How do we trace from the coil through the section into the panel, and then ultimately into the building and the people that have done the installation. And there's a whole raft of requirements now mandated under digital product passports, which I've got to say is still relatively new within the industry, and still guidance to be shared. But the Code for Construction Product Information is helping do that. As an association, just as we did for the Building Safety Act, we have produced a whole series of guidance notes for the Light Steel Frame Association membership. Some of those are in the public domain, some are exclusive to members. But if anybody on the call wants to access any of those guidance documents, then put something into the chat and I'll make sure we get them shared at the end. I mentioned that fire safety was one of the big factors when we look at Building Safety Act. It's probably the primary driver. What that's done is it's meant that we've had to reevaluate some of the test methods and some of the test specifications that have been used for light steel frame in the UK historically. And whilst I won't go through this in too much detail, the regulatory scope has expanded, and there is a forensic view on all types of fire testing and all test facilities that have historically been doing fire testing in the UK. Most recently, and you'll see from the report that's kind of cited on the right-hand side of the slide here, the Light Steel Frame Association engaged with and collaborated with the Steel Construction Institute to address a fairly significant question that was raised about 18 months ago, which was we've only ever tested from one side a typical light steel frame wall. What happens if there's a fire simultaneously on two sides of the same wall? Would it still perform? Does it have enough inbuilt tolerance, shall we say, to sustain and perform correctly if a fire was on both sides of the wall panel? And the report on the right-hand side, which is in the public domain, validates that light steel frame designs as they are now can actually sustain fire on both sides. But this was something that's come out of all of the work around the building safety regulations and changes to the UK Fire Safety Act. So we have a lot of work as an association, and the industry more broadly has a lot of work to do, and is undertaking a lot of work on retesting and validating a lot of the established light steel frame technologies, but obviously retesting some of the newer technologies to respond to the latest fire safety drivers. Now, the wider landscape, and I know specifically in Ireland, you have the NSAI, and you're looking at, you have Agremont certification as well. We've had Agremont certification in the UK for many decades, but we also have other certification bodies like the Steel Construction Institute, working collaboratively with the NHBC, or BOPAS, which is Build Offsite Property Assurance Scheme, and other European-based validation and certification organizations like Kiwa. Some of these will be familiar to you. They don't specifically focus entirely on like edge steel frame. The only organization I've mentioned that is entirely looking at steel is the Steel Construction Institute in the UK. And our organization, the Light Steel Frame Association, leans very heavily on the SCI for technical support and the work that they do with various universities and through various government-funded research activity. But I would say, linked to the changes in regulation, improvements in fire performance, that there is a lot of pressure in the UK on these and other certification and validation bodies to reassess and get through the process lots and lots of different light steel frame solutions, and we don't always have the capacity to cope with demand, and I think you have a similar situation within Ireland. I mentioned the drive towards net zero and sustainability. Often people will say, well, steel's not a very sustainable material, and therefore like edge steel frame and the use of it in various applications can't be that sustainable. I don't think you could be further from the truth in reality. I think with the emergence of electric arc furnaces and green steel now starting to hit the market, we're now starting to see significant reductions in embodied carbon, a much better understanding of how the resource is used, much greater focus on lean engineering. So whether we can take weight out of certain sections, whether we can roll form more efficient sections. But most importantly, to look at the whole life parameter. So there might be some relatively high embodied carbon, even with green steel in the material at the start of the process. If you take a whole life design, and particularly a design for deconstruction approach, steel is one of the most sustainable products on the planet and is infinitely recyclable. So somebody once told me that there's enough steel already in existence in the world for us to recycle and continue almost infinitely if we could just recycle it in the right way and reuse it in the right way. So there's a definite shift in terms of design ethos towards design for deconstruction, so that we can reclaim in the future individual components, joists, stud, track, and know through the golden thread when those components were made, and whether we choose to reuse certain panels or certain components will be a decision for people in the future. But the Light Steel Frame Association has done a lot of work in this area to encourage members to get on board with the whole traceability of componentry, the material passports, and then ultimately to engage with the suppliers of steel to try and move us more towards a green steel future. It's a little bit expensive at the moment, but there's a definite trend in this direction. In terms of the broader trends, what are we actually doing with light steel frame, and how are we developing products and systems that are addressing some of those productivity issues that I raised before? Well, we've got load bearing and non-load bearing solutions. So we've either got light steel frame solutions that will be full structural solutions from the ground up, or we've got infill walling, often referred to as non-load bearing, panels and sections that fit within other primary structures. So in that case, you would see infill walling in light steel frame, typically being used alongside a cast in situ concrete structure, primary structure. There are some developments in oversail systems. So these are where light steel frames don't sit within the structure, they sit outside of the structure, and we're seeing quite a bit of collaboration between facade designers and engineers and light steel frame companies within the oversail activity. But the most significant shift is this desire to look at closed panel technology. So how can we add more value to the light steel frame system itself? Can we add insulation? Can we add glazing? Can we add facades to the outside? Can we provide a closed panel system to site so that you're not having to have lots and lots of follow-on trades? And there are several companies that have moved in this area, which I'll touch upon in a few moments. But a number of the light steel frame suppliers are integrated with a number of the board suppliers and the insulation suppliers within the UK. And some of those are offering 30-year plus warranties for through wall closed panel light steel frame techniques. And that's a very interesting shift, because that's emerged only in the last two to 3 years, really. One other advantage that our light steel frame members have got is that they've got almost infinite capacity in terms of roll forming. And if they're not selling their sections and panels directly to contractors or onto projects that they're building themselves, they have the option to sell them to other offsite manufacturers. So I've mentioned here modular buildings, which Neil touched upon before, and pods, which Neil touched upon before. So almost all pods that are manufactured in the UK are manufactured from light gauge steel componentry, and there is some integration around various vertical markets and certain trends that we've seen in recent times. Here's a few, just half a dozen of our associates and members in terms of innovation. So things to look out for. There are two here on the right-hand side that really go towards the decarbonised green steel angles. So you've got the Eco LSF system from FrameClad in the market. You've got Metsec that have launched a whole decarb product, which is again is a green steel, light steel frame solution. Over on the left-hand side of the slide, you've got a very novel innovation by FrameClad called Leaf. This is an adjustable frame. So the frame can be two-dimensional panelized, but you still have an adjustment to be able to allow it to expand or contract in size to suit the tolerances of the steel frame you might be putting it into. The middle image, which is an Ashton Lacey image, is of a system called Hulk. That's a load-bearing system that goes up to 15 stories. So quite interesting in terms of how they push the boundaries of how high we can go with light steel frame. Bottom left-hand corner, there's an example of the through-wall system. This is from through a brand called Remagine, which is linked into the ETEX group. And then the middle bottom image there from Intrastack, which is actually part of the Saint-Gobain group, is again offering a through-wall specification using lots of other Saint-Gobain products to effectively deliver what would ultimately be called a closed panel light steel frame system. And I've picked half a dozen. Again, I could have probably picked 20 innovations to go through, but these are just some examples of the direction of travel and where some of the novelty and innovation is coming from within the UK light steel frame sector. So a couple of final slides to wrap up with. One of the biggest changes we've seen in the UK has been the proliferation of imports of machines from oversized, portable, relatively compact machines for rolling light gauge steel frame sections. And I put three examples on the slide here. These are probably the three most common within the UK. So FrameCAD, Howick, and Architect, each offering very similar machines, but there are very different software integration opportunities with these different platforms. There are probably about 8 or 9 different machine importers into the UK light steel frame market. So this is not a full picture, but it's just an example of the types of machines we're saying. These machines are relocatable, they're portable. We've got 2 clients of ours that actually put these machines inside site containers, and they actually run and roll steel on site at the coalface and then create panels on the construction site and lift them straight in to position. But just thought it'd be worth touching on the trends around machinery and equipment. So just to summarize where the light steel frame sector is in terms of scale in the UK, it's relatively popular, but it's nowhere near in terms of market penetration of, say, timber frame in low-rise housing. We have around 15 light steel frame manufacturers in the UK. Those are companies that own their own roll forming machines and actually roll and fabricate panels or components. There are other downstream, what we call integrators, that aren't actually manufacturers, but they will sell light steel frame and procure from somewhere else. Those 15 and the total market is around 300 million. So not insignificant, but again, perhaps not as big as it could be if our economy was booming. But it is growing at a rate of around 5.5% annual growth. And if you extract that out over the next 5 years or so, if it is a straight line, which we don't think it will, we think it'll increase, then we're looking at something possibly at the upper end of our estimates. It could be a £500 million turnover sector within the next 5 years. So just to wrap up, Light Steel Frame Association has everything online that you need to find out about where our members are. If you need to find any of the members, they're all listed on there. Lots of those documents I've touched on, and policies and regulation guidance documents, are on the Light Steel Frame Association website. You can see the link there. As I say, some of it is locked down to members, but if you want access to it, then you can contact me offline. We're very busy as an organisation. Always trying to look at the next trend that's coming through. So the newsroom has got regular features, and there's regular events, webinars, podcasts that are coming on stream, and various other conferences and things. If you wish to know more about light steel frame trends in the UK, then please stay in touch with the Light Steel Frame Association. One final shout out from me, wearing another hat. So going back to wearing my Cogent hat now, I'm chairing a conference in Ireland in 4 weeks time. It's a collaboration. We've worked with MMC Ireland on their national conference now for the last 4 years. This year is a huge event, much bigger, nearly twice the size of what we've run last year. And there's a very relevant presentation being given by Daniel McCrum, who obviously is connected in to the network here. He's looking at a standardization initiative around light steel frame, specifically as a presentation within that conference. So I would urge you, if you have more interest and you want to hear about some of the dynamics of what's happening in the Irish market and maybe compare with some of the things I've spoken about today, that you get a ticket and go along to that event on the 5th of March. And that's it from me. Thanks very much for your time.
Then thanks, Darren. A lot of those challenges or opportunities are similar in Ireland, although slightly in different ways, whether you call them challenges or opportunities around the building regulations and changes, I suppose, around that side of things. Digital project digital product passports and digital building passports that are coming in through the EU directives. Obviously, fire regulations in there, and we've had obviously issues in Ireland costing billions of euro due to poor construction detailing and that, especially around apartments in Ireland, that again was picked up by the state later on. And then yeah, the testing and the validation protocols in there, and so that's some of what Dan is trying to help with as well on his project. But that requirement around the testing and validation side of things, and obviously the whole drive to net zero across Europe in there to get into 50% reduction in carbon by 2030 and basically fully decarbonised by 2050 as a whole economy in Europe, with each sector doing their own bit for it. So lots of parallels there. So we'll have some interesting discussions about that in the Q&A session at the end. If anyone has any specific questions for Darren, please do post them in the Q&A there at the bottom of the screen, and we'll deal with them at the very end. Okay, with that, so we're going to move on to our third presenter, which is Waco, who's Executive Chair and Founder of Prefabrication Council of Australia, and also the CEO and founder of PowerHouse Homes and models in Australia. And he's going to give us some lessons learned from Australia. So over to you, Waco.
Good day from down under. It's 12, nearly 12 o'clock midnight here. What I like to share, I'll keep it as short as possible, is something practical that I've been championing since 2007. Some practical experience, and I'll finish off by some observation between Australia and Ireland, some 5 key insights. So I'll take you through what we've been doing, some really grounded experience that we have been doing for the last nearly 2 decades. And so let's take it through. So you may ask questions. It's a very simple presentation, but hopefully we'll get to the core of our innovation. Next slide, please. The company I've been championing since 2007 offers 3 key product in that it's fully volumetric, and second one is SIP, so standard structural insulated panels, and the third one is a hybrid system. So these benefits are listed here. So obviously, what you expect from a non-conventional build is a cost benefit. So in Australia, we typically offer between 20 to 40% cost saving in comparison with the conventional build, and cost benefit generated from not just the manufacturing, but more from integration of your supply chain, engaging our trading partners such as China and other Asian countries. In this case, as Australia, in the Australian construction landscape, a lot of products, actually, bulk of the products actually imported from China, which produce pretty much just about everything that Australia needs in the construction sector. As I mentioned before, we have 3 systems. One is fully volumetric, second one is structural inset panels, and the last one is hybrid. As we all know, volumetric is fantastic if the construction site is in a remote area where labor is an issue. As you know, Australia is a very large continent. It has condensed cities like Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, etc. But they also have a very big outback where you have a small population but huge land, and logistics always has been a challenge. When it comes to volumetric construction, it is absolutely handy for those areas, whereas in more condensed area in the city area, modular construction may not be suitable. A lot of the suburbs are made of small narrow streets and laneways, and volumetric may not be the way to go. So in this case, you break down the modules into panels. Some might know structural inset panels. The downside, of course, is that the labor cost could be very high. So it might offset the benefit of the logistics. So then hence the third system, which is pretty much a modular plus SIPs system that give you the flexibility to service dense areas like Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, etc. So with all three systems going the same time, that give you absolutely high flexibility in that you'll be able to build low, medium, high density dwellings, not just a single semi-detached or detached homes, but also you'll be able to build multi-level apartments. As I mentioned before, PowerHouse Homes that I've been championing since 2007 is a Melbourne-based prefab housing company that is specialized in R&D, manufacture, construct of prefab buildings that cater for both residential and commercial markets. We believe we have revolutionized the approach to housing with the most innovative and unique formula, placing us amongst the market leaders in prefab building market. Affordable yet eco-friendly homes designed by multi-award-winning Australian architects and 12-week turnaround from order to turnkey are amongst the key USPs that PowerHouse Home has to offer. So what we're doing here is that we focus on afford and sustainability, and most our buildings are steel structured, future proofing, these are other features, and environmental sustainable. In that we are pretty big on circular economy. Just about every dwelling design has been given that sort of attention. So the home needs to be given second, third, even fourth lease of life once they reach their expiry date by a household. So circular economy is very, very big part of our offering. And in terms of prefabrication, we adopt pretty much automotive industry style prefabrication with electronic data interface as a running system, and supply chain management methodology, limiting on-site construction and increasing overall delivery speed and quality. So the system is aiming at addressing housing shortage and unaffordability, which are the key elements to Australian housing crisis, which we've been talking about or experiencing for the last decade or so. So I mentioned earlier about the cost benefit. Then the building methodology I just mentioned based on modular system, so it's a fully volumetric, and you also have the SIP system, and then the third system is the hybrid. Once using steel, as we know, steel does have the capability to be stackable. So our prefab steel frame modules are designed and engineered to be stackable up to 19 levels without the support of a superstructure, with key benefits such as increased efficiency, improved quality, reduced waste, enhanced safety, flexibility, scalability, cost effectiveness, and reduced site disruption. And of course, improved logistics is a part of it. So we've got one building at the moment we are working on. It's a 23-story, 3 towers, actually 3 stories in Melbourne. And it's a total modular design with a in situ podium. So it just started to happen. Just give you a bit of a insight of what's happening in Australia build space. Australia, as you know, it's a very big country, but small population. Population typically concentrates on the East Coast and West Coast. Few people living in the center. You have beautiful, terrain, outbacks, etc. Beautiful for traveling, but most people, choose to live along the coast. In that, you got Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, and Gold Coast, etc. Heavily condensed, populated. Then the housing crisis has deepened in the last 10 years, especially after COVID. Few people moved around. Australia is also a country of immigration, which every year attract hundreds of thousands of people into Australia, and making Australia housing crisis basically, situation a lot worse. So we are facing tremendous pressure when it comes to housing supplies, and because the population at the moment, that I was born in Shanghai myself, so Australia, the total population of Australia is no more than the population of Shanghai, yet living in such a big country. And Australia doesn't produce much light industrial products, so it heavily relies on imports, such as windows, just about everything from countries like China. So in that, and also you have scarcity of available labor. The industry standards is very much state-based. So you may be able to do something in Victoria, where I'm based, which has the capital city as Melbourne. Does not necessarily mean that you'll be able to do the same thing in other states. So which add another layer of cost. So these are the issues that, as the chair for Prefab Council, we're currently addressing that at the moment, alongside the company I've been running for the last nearly 2 decades. So this is a project we are working on at the moment in Queensland, in Gold Coast. It's a 21-story apartment building, with exception to the podium, which will be built in situ. The rest is pretty much are going to be built with steel frame modules. As you can see, if I don't tell you, it's going to be built in volumetric system, you won't be able to see it. So that's a secret to a successful design, I guess, a successful execution of a modular build. If you can see it, if you see any trace of modules, I think you almost can have the conclusion that this project has failed. So good design, successful project of modular build or prefab build should not see any traceability of the system. If anything, modular system, like any other systems under the MMC umbrella, should be the enabler, not a bridge, so to speak, that you'll be able to see it. Next slide, please. So this is something that we have been championing for a while, and we're very proud of the system. I talked about the background in a few minutes ago. In Australia, people living along the coast, which heavily populated, is sometimes big, large modules won't be able to get through small streets. Makes absolutely challenging to execute modular build projects. So we thought we could break down the modules in theory, you break modules into 6 panels, and here comes the SIP system. And then realizing Australia's got also labor issue too. Australia labor is not, obviously being a developed country, country, the labor in Australia has never been cheap. If anything, after the COVID, the labor becomes so expensive. It literally had, I don't know how many folds has gone up since it pretty much lost count. I thought you cannot beat that. It's just part of the game. The only way to do it is that to take advantage of the supply chain and make a supply chain work for us rather against us. So in that, you have flat pack panels, you might call it SIPs, for areas where you have no amenities. For those areas where you have services like bathrooms or kitchens, you modularize them. And you modularize them in countries such as China, where labor are abundant and also less costly. And we call a service unit. And then you clipped it together on site. So that way you basically pick up the best of the both worlds, and the product absolutely affordable. So that's been a quite a powerful proposition from PowerHouse Homes, which we've been running for the last nearly 2 decades. Next slide, please. So quick illustration how this system works. So I mean, obviously this is not precise, but you'll probably get it at the end of this presentation. So foundation is something you will need depending on the soil condition, whether screw piles or strip footing, you will need that. So the picture on the left top part illustrates that in the two modules in painting yellow is something that you have services in. So you might have 2 bathrooms that's prefabricated offsite. And then the left-hand bit with the blue roof is basically made of SIPs, and the corridor in the middle, same SIPs as well. So the image to the left corner, bottom corner, is something you want to get to. So next slide, please. So that's basically a sequence of you putting this hybrid system together in order to create a 3-bedroom home. Yes, next, please. And all these screw trusses are prefabricated, to be erected on site, together with roofing. Next slide, please. Keep going. And in Australia, I'm not, sorry, last slide. Last slide. Yes, in Australia, I'm not sure how UK or Ireland's been going currently in dealing with the housing affordability. In Australia, tiny homes or tiny houses being very popular. They're popping up everywhere, and some of the states have loosened up the regulations which allow families to utilize their backyard to erect a tiny home up to 60 square meters, whereas in the past, you won't be able to. I think now we have New South Wales leading the way. Victoria has followed. I think Queensland might have done the same thing. So this is all a part and parcel of the solution to tackle the housing crisis. Next slide, please. So as all we know, modular construction, like or MMC, is intended to provide speed. And not only speed, but they actually get to remote areas. These is actually actual shots of a modular home, which look like containers, but they're not, being craned onto a summit of Mambula. In those who know Australia well, Mambula is a snow resort type of small mountain, not far from, about 4 hours from Melbourne CBD. And as it happened, snow just fell, and I personally took this shot to show the condition that the modules can work in, and it's quite hilly as well. The trucks were struggling getting up the hill. So speed definitely is a one key element of the offering. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And mentioned early on, our design is very much based on eco, what do you call it? Circular economy. So whatever gets built should be able to have, or should be able to be given, second or even third lease of life, instead of building everything and gets bulldozed or flattened and ended up in tips. these homes should be given. And it's not because we're saying it. It's got to be designed in such a way that can be given the second lease of life. So sustainability has been a very, very hot word. You can hear it all the time, and they're talking about, okay, what is the energy rating, etc., etc. But I think the most down to earth way of delivering sustainability in a true way is to offer the opportunity to recycle, to make product part of your product or whole house, whole dwellings as recyclable, reusable. So it's like these days, circular economy is quite big. You see coming through in clothing, in furniture, etc. But how often we come across construction projects that comes with the same bells and whistles. So that's something we are very proud to champion, and hopefully others will follow and learn from each other. Next slide, please. It's a project we did in regional area of Victoria a few years back, which Australia currently going through a lot of bushfires, forest fires at the moment. Every year we lose quite a few homes. So this is one project we are very proud of, using a lot of fire retardant materials. In Australia, we have got something like a Bell, so Bell bushfire rating. It's a short form. So we have different rating. This is a 40, so which means you'll be able to sustain certain hours before it gets melted. So this is a product this is actually dwelling we designed using that Bell rated materials as an alternative. So that just goes to show the strength of modular build. It's just not that something in Australia we like, a bit like UK or Ireland that we're used to stick build. I use a timber structure, trusses, etc., and you clad it with bricks, etc. So it may not stand. I mean, on this side, there used to be a brick home. Obviously, it got burned down in fire very quickly. Next slide, please.
I'm just conscious of the time, Waco.
Yeah,
if you just next one, thanks.
So, and prefab should be able to. I mean, that's just the myth that you build boxes and then they can't be customized, but that's totally untrue. Next slide, please. So you can see these finishes of the homes we built, quite high end. Keep going. And of course, that explains why the quality is there. Keep going, yeah. The core message is one of the system change. MMC is not merely a new way to build a wall. It is a new way to organize an industry, foster innovation, and deliver societal value. It requires builders to think like manufacturers, manufacturers to think like designers, and governments to think like partners. I see, as a chair for Prefab Council Australia, also the CEO for PowerHouse Homes, I see immense potential in fostering a direct dialogue between our ecosystem. Our challenges in housing, sustainability, and productivity are shared. By learning from each other's experiments, both triumphs and setbacks, we can collectively advance a more resilient, efficient, and sustainable built environment for future generations. Let's continue the conversation. I welcome your thoughts and insights on how parallel journeys can interact. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Waco. Thank you very much for those insights from the Australian perspective. So I know we're conscious of the time, but we're going to just try and do a few questions here at the end.